Welcome back to the Village Bonfire for another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. A podcast not just for your mind, but for your body and spirit too. Here we don't just talk theory. Instead, we compassionately engage with our lived experiences and a wide variety of topics together, all to invite the question, in these times we find ourselves in, how do we be more human? Thank you for being here. May these conversations awaken, inspire, repair, and evolve something deep within each of us, and serve the wild, tender aliveness of our personal and collective hearts. Welcome to Wild Sacred Journey podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and start like we always do with lighting a candle, invoking that village bonfire. The warmth, the light, the nourishment that comes from us all gathering together to share, to heal, to repair, to be better. And let's take a few deep breaths in and out here. Acknowledging as we begin the land that we are each on, how it holds us, feeds us, tends to us, shelters us. Also acknowledging the land of our ancestors, since many of us do not live on those lands. And acknowledging the people who came before us on the lands that we're on, the ancestors of these lands. And also acknowledging the ones who will come after. The seeds we plant now are the fruits they get. So it feels particularly poignant to sort of say some of that today because our guest, Dr. Shanequa Smith, an amazing human, a really good friend, is here today. And her passions are restorative justice practices. We'll get kind of more into that later, but I know she and I personally have had a lot of really amazing conversations around complicated relationships with land for folks who have either dealt with forced migration or slavery or genocide, things like that. So, it feels poignant today. And then also with the restorative justice, the idea of calling in also the ones who come after us and something about sort of our shifting our ancestral legacies. So, and repair and things like that. So it felt really poignant to sort of say some of those words today. I was really aware of a deeper resonance in them just by having Shanequa here. So welcome, Shanequa. I'm really excited to have you. Yeah, I'm really honored that you're here. So Shanequa and I met through self-organizing community initiatives and learning and networking, and she reached out to me and was like, we should talk. I get your vibe. I dig your vibe. We should talk. And I was like, okay, I dig your vibe. and it's really unfolded into what has been a really powerful and beautiful friendship for me. And her, I feel like I found a fellow wise soul who likes to jump right into like just the important stuff in life and is like always curious, always learning. I'm always deeply inspired by just her huge heart and the way she advocates and community organizes, and just the wise, caring culture that she represents and how she lives her life. And so I'm inspired, and I learn and I share, and So more formally, she has a doctorate in human and community development. She's a restorative practitioner, and her work focuses around joy, education, and connecting people to opportunities while also building alternative spaces and systems. And she is located in Charleston, West Virginia. So Shanequa, yeah, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
Mm-hmm. So I like to start off asking everybody who comes on the show, you know, in cultures around the world, people traditionally introduce themselves with lineage or other markers that kind of help the people they're meeting locate them in the social fabric of things. And so I would like to give you an opportunity sort of beyond your bio, beyond our sort of more formalized, like white academic Western professional ways of sort of identifying ourselves. What are identities, roles, locations, ancestry, lineage, or anything that you want to share that sort of helps orient you in our larger world, our social fabric?
Well, currently I'm in Charleston, West Virginia. I lived here for the past 20 years and raised my son and daughter here. I'm originally from Harlem, New York, where I was born and raised. And I came to West Virginia fleeing the crack system that I was raised in, the drug system. I didn't want my children to grow up and sell drugs. I didn't want to be consumed by the environment. And West Virginia was the only escape way out. And so I left. My mother, she was born in New York, and my grandmother, she ran away from sharecropping at the age of 14 from Georgia. Wow. She never went back to see her mother. She never went back to Georgia. And so by the age of 14, my grandmother came to New York. She was dead by 42 from psoriasis of the liver, which left my mother at 9 years old with her siblings that were very abusive to her. And so she grew up with a very traumatic childhood experience. And my mother grew up and she had 6 children in 10 years. By 6 different men. So all my siblings have different fathers. And I know that her childhood traumas that she never healed from consumed her as a mother. So I did not have a mother, and I had to become a mother at 5 and raise my sisters and brothers, the 5 that was behind me. And so we grew up in a lot of traumatic experiences and had a lot of traumatic experiences. I don't know how many of your listeners are aware of ACEs scores or adverse childhood experiences. And there's a study that was done many years ago, and it shows that traumatic experiences that children have when they don't heal from them, it formulates who they become as adults. And they use drugs, and they may not be focused and disciplined, a lack of self-agency. And this is all due based on situations that humans grow in, and they're never nurtured back to their realistic being. And so having all those experiences, and like I said, I came here 20 years ago with a high school diploma and a 1-year-old son and his father, and thought that I would come to a better place. But at that time, I knew nothing about systematic oppression. I knew nothing about generational trauma. I knew nothing about all these things. I knew about racism because I had to deal with it, but I was always taught just try to navigate it the best way you can. I never was taught solutions on how to address it or how to heal from it internally. And coming here with a high school diploma, because I come from an apolitical background and no education, people in my family, we don't think about education, but I was able to come to West Virginia. It was just something in me, a divine space in me that wanted different than what I never seen. And so I had my high school diploma, and I knew I had to go to college to get a better job. That's what everybody said. So I went on my journey to get a 4-year degree so I can be an example for my son and do better. And lo and behold, my divine space took me on a path I never thought I would go. I went from getting a degree in business because I thought if I make money and work for the government, I can help all my family get out the hood and be an example for my sisters and brothers and my kids. But I did so good with with my bachelor's degree, I was encouraged to get a master's. And I was going to get a master's in business administration and work for the government and make all this money. And one of my counselors told me one day, Shanequa, do not follow money, follow your passion, and the money will follow you. And that changed my whole trajectory. And I went to get my master's in school counseling because I knew that was my gift and purpose. And so I wanted to go into the schools and work with the schools and work with the community and try to help understand and save us and be that bridge, I would say, because there's a gap between the schools and the communities and the families. Mm. And long story short, got my master's in school counseling. Thank God for internships, because I learned early in the game that there was so much black tape in the school system and I couldn't really be a counselor. I couldn't really help. And as I told you, I was raised in radical situations, so I wasn't really trained how to be submissive to places just because. So I didn't, I couldn't work in the school system because they don't let you be a counselor. And our spaces down here mostly, and your job is dictated by the principal, so it can be up and down. So what I did, I went into the nonprofit space, as people do, to work and survive. And once again, this divine space told me, hey, go get your doctorate. And I'm like, a doctorate? What is that? I don't know what that is. And I don't want to work in academia. I don't even want to write. Long story short, I went to WVU, and it was a long 6-year journey. But I know I was divinely placed there. And in those studies, I've learned what was the problem. People say all the time we're apathetic. And I know we do apathetic things, but I didn't know why. I know we didn't want to be like this, but we still do a lot of things that are in an apathetic space. But this is where I learned about trauma, generational trauma. This is when I learned about systematic oppression. Contextual oppression. This is when I learned the difference between inequalities and equities. I didn't know anything about this. And through my studies, I've learned, oh my, our self-efficacy and our self-agency is broken before we even know who we are as human beings. And not only is that an issue, but this way of living has become culture, i.e. hood. So we don't even recognize that we're being in a self-destructive space, or that we have opportunities to be other. And this just took me on another journey to say, hey, we need healing. We need learning. We don't just need programs. We don't need more food pantries. We need to heal and learn and get skills so we can grow our own food. We need to heal and learn so we can build our own economics. But as I continue to try to cry out this voice, I realize a lot of people's survival depends on our brokenness. If we don't stay broken, you can't have a lot of cops. You can't have a lot of social workers. You can't have a lot of case managers. You can't have a lot of these organizations that's here to help us, but we never get the drop-ins of it. And I know I'm in a very strategic place because most people grow up and realize that we live in a system that is not equal to everyone. And because we are humanly compassionate and we're in that place, we try our best to do these good things for these people. But a lot of times we have good intents and wrong approaches. And the difference between me, I am part of the people. And most of the time we never get to be at these places of power or have conversations to teach people on what we really need. So we don't learn how to articulate what we need. They never learn what we need. And we constantly have this world of people working hard and not realizing why we are not better people. We have so many things than our ancestors had. Our ancestors had very little and did great things. What's wrong with us? Because we have become human doings and moved away from our human beings. So I'm just in a space of helping us. And truthfully, I didn't sign up for this job. Because, I wanted to be like everybody else, get a job, work 30 years, retire, if I make it, But is this bigger calling that's saying, no, it's more than that. And I'm grateful and honored to be in this space and heal in this space and be an example of what we really can be if we turn to our natural selves.
Yeah, so many powerful threads, I feel like, in what you just shared. And one that's really jumping out at me first is sort of that piece about culture, right? And I think that that's from sort of my perspective as like an energetic medicine practitioner, as an energy healer, it really hit me one day. We have sort of the multiple definitions of culture, right? We have the idea of culture being like the arts we create or the systems that we live in, or like shared morals and values and stories, right? So kind of that idea, like arts and culture kind of. But then we also have culture that's like in the biological definition, the petri dish, that when you're doing an experiment or you're growing cells, right, you're culturing cells. And so it's like, it's the petri dish, the culture is the environment that informs how the cells grow. And in doing the energy work that I do, I've come to really see how those two definitions are not separate, and they actually like overlap, because we have these energy fields, we have these spaces that store the experiences that have happened to us, that have happened to our ancestors, that have happened to, like, you know, whoever, right? And that all is stored, and that becomes our culture. That becomes the petri dish that informs how our cells actually grow, how our brains actually develop. Like, you know, yes, it's neural pathways, but it's also DNA. You know, epigenetics show that trauma can change. We can extended periods of trauma actually shift how our cells, how our genes actually express themselves. So our genes, our DNA will actually change around our adaptations to trauma, and then get passed down, because it starts, if it assumes that if we're living in this environment and this environment is ongoing, how helpful will it be for our descendants to then have the adaptations genetically hardwired into them that we need to survive those things. And so all of that becomes the culture that we like literally develop in. And then, because that's what we've developed in, that informs what we create in the world, the systems that we create, the arts that we create, the stories that we create, right? All of that is informed by the culture that developed, right? And so it becomes this like kind of almost feedback loop. You know, and so, I mean, it's so powerful what you're sharing, you know, because I think, yeah, it's, you know, you stand in this place and you're challenging what our internalized white supremacy, both for us in white bodies and also for bodies of color, bodies of culture, right? Everybody has some level of internalized white supremacy. But you're challenging like what our white supremacy tells us is innate about people, by saying, no, it's a culture that's developed in response to trauma, that then almost makes it seem innate, because we're then that culture informs how we develop and grow, and it becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, that is actually true. And the sad thing is that the lack of knowledge of us knowing this perpetuates the cycle that we're always in. And if a plant is not growing, you don't change the plant, you change the environment. And when you raise people, some people say, how could people grow up and sell drugs? How could people do these things? Well, to tell you the truth, people grew up in environments where that's all they see. And when you see your parents being the working poor, it's different when people work 40 hours a week. Most Americans, most individuals work 40 hours a week. But when I can work 40 hours a week and pay for retirement, pay for my nice house, pay for my car, put away for my kids' college, do all the things and budget out these things, you know, you're living an average life. But when you're working 60 hours a week and you don't have no car, and you're trying to make sure your kids got stuff for school, and you can't keep up with what your kids need, and you can't keep the AC on, and you can't afford the gas, and you can't, I mean, it's a whole level of stress. And I think the hardest thing for me, Kate, is that for many years, living in the hood, raised in the hood, I was born, raised, bred, and raised my children in the hood. So it's different levels. And not only what I have inherited, but also what I have experienced. And I look and I say, yes, we do live in environments where you don't know any different. You cannot produce and see what you never seen. You never had no support from. So if you have working parents that's poor, or the parents have not, because me as an individual, and I'm grateful to have received the healing that I have, but the average parent that's my age that raised my children, we are the broken children that never was healed and chronologically became adults and thought that if we conceive or had other human beings, this would be a form of love that we can get that we never get. Come to find out, it caused us to have more responsibilities and capacity that a lot of us didn't even have. So here we have this next generation of children that, yes, we work hard and we gave them maybe more shelter and food and clothing, because I didn't have that as a kid. So I thought raising children, you need to get them food, shelter, clothing, keep them safe, send them to school, try to keep them busy, show them, expose them. That's what I thought as a parent. I didn't know anything about emotional support. I didn't know anything about helping them connect to their purpose of life, giving them purpose. How do I help them navigate all these things that they had that didn't validate anything? Because we could see the condition of these children these days. And the problem is because they're not loved. They don't know who they are. And us parents, we became part of the work and poor cycle. And as we continue to grow and learn, see, my mother was taught, be quiet, don't say nothing about it. I was taught that question it or separate yourself from it. This generation is mad about it. And somebody better explain why it's like this. And so it's kind of it's the same situation we're dealing with. It's just that we're responding to it differently.
Yeah.
And I realized, even with my kids, I mean, my children watch me. My children are now 20 and 20. My son just turned 21. My daughter just turned 19. I finished my PhD in 2019. And my children, and went to school since 2004. So from 2004 to 2019, I've been a student and worked in between. And my children watch me struggle. They watch me talk about the importance of school. They watch me. And to this day, we have not physically made it out the hood. Mentally, spiritually, we are. I hope we physically. But my children are looking at me and it's like, well, mommy, why are you doing all that? What is the benefits? We have not benefited much. And I'm looking at them, well, trying to help them create a path of success that is not parallel to what we consider in our communities as success. Because we know systematically is put there. And then sad, we got social media that glorify these behaviors. And then when our children try to emulate these things, they wind up in the modern day slavery system of being incarcerated. Or once they're incarcerated and they're out of jail at the age of 21, 22, because they have a felony, they can't get any education. They can't get any housing. They can't get any help to support them. So when people are in this day to 2022, still facing these things, how do we position them to say, let's work together, let's be a community, have hope in our system? And they seen their brothers broken. They seen their fathers incarcerated for years, in jail. There's people, Black people, colored people, poor people in jail right now for what people making money off of right now. Marijuana right now, they making all kind of money off of marijuana. It's people in jail right now. So I'm teaching, and I had to reteach my children and also reteach myself. Because I was taught to try your best to be part of a system that never made room for you, don't accept you, and whatever internal traumas you get, you accept it because you're lucky you in that system. But I have learned that is not so. And I have learned that any system that poor people, people of color, people of different cultures, anywhere we survive, we have to build an alternative system. Rather as alternative program, rather as alternative space, we always have to build alternative space to help us grow and be who we need to be. And I meet a lot of nice white people that because they operate in this wicked system, they believe in it. And I had to have a talk with one of my close white friends and tell her, I said, I understand that that's your daddy. You can't ask no one to be against their father. If your father raised you, gave you good experiences, bedtime stories provided for you, and you found out your father was a murderer, would that stop you from loving your father? It may put a war inside of you that you may feel bad that someone you love and honor that took care of you had did something so bad. But would that stop you from loving your father? Would that stop you from being with your father? Most of us, if I had a father, yes, I would be hurt, but because I never had a father. But if I had a father and he loved me and took care of me, I probably would be devastated. He did such a harsh thing, but I would try to get him help. I would try to see if it's some way that he can be healed from that, or how could we heal, but I don't think I would throw my father away because that's my father. You understand? So there's a lot of people, the system is their father. They inherited that. They have their roots in that. And I can't go fight somebody, even if what they believe is harmful to me. I can't fight you for your roots. like you can't fight me for mine. So I have learned that this system that you have inherited, that generationally you've been a part of, that's who you are. And yes, we are good human beings, so we're trying our best to change. But the fact that we first have to call the elephant out, that system is not good for all people. It wasn't designed for that in the beginning. And I tell, my friends, I say, none of us, and, a 1-bedroom apartment was never meant for 20 people living there. It never was designed for that, even though some people we have, but it's not designed for 20 people.
Yeah.
But we have a few people inside this 1-bedroom, rearranging it, remodeling it, making us believe that the 15 of us that have been waiting out there for generations are going to get in there. We're not. So I've learned that the good-hearted people that operate in that wicked system, the only thing they really can, is 2 things that they can do. One, they can teach us how to be a system, because the system was very strategic in breaking us, not only internally, individually, but also the power that we have collectively. So the first thing that we need to learn is and this is part of healing. Healing is learning. How do we become a system ourselves? We create this alternative system. The second thing that they can do is release the resources we need to build our system. There's no need for us to spend a little bit of life and a little bit of time we have fighting this well-established system that's been here before we got here. They've been doing these things for hundreds of years, wickedly. And for hundreds of years, there's been good-hearted people fighting against it. I believe that. However, we can see that the system is still standing. And every time we cut off one head of injustice, another one goes back. We cut off one head, another one goes back. So will we continue to fight? And then when we look back, what have we built? I don't want to pass down the fighting to my children because we're not going to win. We don't have enough life, enough time, and enough resources to fight. We don't. We don't have it. But if I build something, I can give them something and let them really know we're in a space that we have to build an alternative space. We live in a system that we have to build alternative systems. And I know there are many people of color that for generations have gotten out of poverty in all ways, because I don't think poverty is also financially. You can be poverty spiritually. But there are some people that have healed and got out generations. Like I know my family, because my children definitely were healed and be removed from this space and be able in a position where they can help others do the same thing. But there's some families that are still never healed from poverty, never healed from slavery. And slavery in the US have changed its face. It never ended. Because once we got free or physically free, the criminal justice system. And we document it, we report it, and still to this day, they are locking up our traumatized brown young Black boys, locking them up, 17, 18, 19 years old, giving them felonies and marks, chains on their ankles, where they can never be free for the rest of their life. Once you get a felony, you can't do nothing. You can't get no higher education, no housing. So now you have to live with a woman or live with somebody that's going to support you, because the system has made it where you can't maintain yourself. Now, if a man or any human being cannot maintain themselves, what does that do to them internally? Not count all the other trauma they've been through as a kid. So now this man in survival mode moves with this woman. What happens? They create another human being. Now they create a human being in this trauma situation, because this man wasn't there for family. He's there for survival. The woman is also there hoping this man can be something that he don't have the capacity to have. We have children. Us women.
Didn't understand that.
That's crazy. I know a lot of people don't understand. That's why I explain. That is so funny.
That's so funny.
But this is how we end up with a lot of one-parent homes. And once these children are producing, us women, we intuitively say we got to do the best we can with whatever capacity is for these children. And the men is like, hey, I'm here for survival mode. You put more on me, I can't. They're gone. But it's designed like this. It is designed. And then I think, Kate, the topping of it is a lot of people, my good-hearted white people, and some of my Black people, that's disconnected. They create all these experiences and opportunities for us when we don't have the capacity or the discipline to take advantage of it. And then it looks like, oh, y'all apathetic. Y'all didn't show up, but we wasn't taught how. We don't know how. When you were a little kid, from you growing up, this process of human development really is significant. Your childhood is significant to how you're going to operate as an adult. And we create no space. See, we are divine creatures, and we have plasticity where we can heal and we can come back to this space. Now, it may take a couple of decades, but we can do it.
It may take a whole lifetime. But
But when we create this space for people to even feel healed, I mean, I'm still healing from internal racism. I didn't know what internal racism was. I just thought, you Black, stay in your place. You're not smart enough. Don't speak up. You last on the totem pole. I always heard it was white men, white women, or Black men, or men and women. And then the Black woman always fall at the bottom pole. So when you're always taught that, oh, you speak Ebonics, oh, you can't speak, or people always unintentionally make you feel like, what you doing here? You don't know this. Or we are taught to be quiet, or we don't know, or we wasn't learned how to be critical thinkers. We didn't learn, and think about it. Where do we learn how to be critical thinkers? Because not until I got a PhD did I learn how to think. How many of us get a chance to be a PhD? I didn't know how to synthesize, to analyze, to be objective, to give my opinion, to know the difference between an opinion and a fact. I didn't know that when children are raised in high trauma areas that their brain is not even developed correctly. So your emotional side of your brain is so focused, your trauma sense, and a part of your brain that reason and learn doesn't get the attention it needs. WVU just did a study that said by the age of 2, children already academically behind. So if you're telling me by the age of 2, you have study, you have research that by the age of 2, children are behind, why are there no early intervention in the housing complexes? Why are there's no after school programs? Oh, Katie, they tell us there's no money, but that's a lie. Because I just seen our president of the United States give another country over $40 billion for war. But Tupac has said over 20 something years ago, our country has money for war, but not to feed the babies. So I realized there's money for whatever wants to be done. Oh, it's a grant. No. The earth is plentiful. We just need the people that have these resources to sit down and learn. Because this system tells us, oh, you have power, go help the people do it. No, how are you going to help people you don't know? We're not car parts. We're not houses. We're creatures. We're all divine. We're all different. How do we do the intricate work we need for healing? And I have learned, because every day I'm decolonizing myself. Because I do not want to take the colonized ways that I have learned, because it's all part of our culture. Like you said, it infiltrates us in all kind of ways. Rather, it's for us to be aggressive or not to do our work. But I'm making sure I decolonize myself, because I don't want to have good intentions, but the wrong approach. And then get frustrated with people because they're not responding to all my good deeds.
I think that piece is so important. I'm hearing like a couple different themes kind of coming through in what you're sharing. And, one being the idea like hurt people, right? And so that's kind of how stuff continues to perpetuate. And, I've really become aware. It really landed for me and shifted things in a really like powerful way for me when I started to realize, the white people who came to this country first, and they weren't even necessarily white at the time, right? Like white people used to have cultures that weren't white, right? They were Irish, or they were Italian, or they were, German, and even Germany wasn't necessarily a whole country. They were a collection of different like tribes and different lands before it became a whole national country, and so like those of us in white bodies today, our ancestors used to have a culture and an identity that wasn't actually white, that had community connection, that had a sense of indigenosity with the land, that had all of that, right? And there were different reasons that all got ruptured. And because they didn't heal from those ruptures, that's when and then rose to power. And then once whiteness became a system of power, it felt safer to align yourselves with that than to risk being out, right? The Irish were looked down upon horribly in this country, in the US, for a long time, until they realized if they became white, not Irish, and kind of gave up what made them Irish, they would suffer less. And so, and the same then with like Italians and with people from Eastern Europe and, all of these people who were close enough to whiteness, who looked enough who looked white enough, right, that they could align themselves with whiteness and therefore align themselves with the power systems. And then you're left with people, Black people, and that's part of why in a lot of countries there's sort of that like gradation, right? And that's part of why, even though racism affects anybody who isn't white, it often affects Black people, and particularly dark-skinned Black people, the worst, because again, there's like the more you can quote unquote pass, the closer you can align yourself to that system of power and feel safe within it, right? And so it's a survival thing, but it's this whole like hurting people. And one of the pieces that I think I'm also sort of hearing, you haven't said this word, but I sort of hear it in what you're sort of talking about is shame. And so I'm curious, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about shame being an unproductive response and emotion in these types of situations, right? I think it's a very human, natural one, but maybe not even natural. I think it's more taught than that. But I think guilt is natural. I think shame is not. I think guilt as an emotion is something we have that lets us know when we've crossed a line, when we've crossed someone else's boundary or crossed our own boundary. I think shame is a power. It's a way of keeping people wanting to align with power. It's a way of invoking that fawn, fit in, freeze response, right? The people pleasing response that you were sort of describing. And like, so your parents' generation was more like and some of the older generations, like, well, racism's a thing and we just have to kind of like just deal with it the best we can and don't rock the boat, right? So that's sort of that fawn fit in response. And then you were sort of describing like you felt like in your generation it was like, no, get out of that system or do what you can to get away from it, right? And that's sort of the flight response. And then you're saying in your kids' generation there's like the anger response of like, but wait, why, right? And so if we're tracking the nervous system, that's actually like a really powerful sign that reparation and repair is starting to happen, right, internally. Because on a nervous system level, that fawn, fit in, freeze response, right, is a trauma response. And then flight is an important step in moving away from the trauma situation. Although when we're talking about systemic issues, we can't ever move away from them, right? That's that other piece. We can't heal in the same situation that created the problem in the first place, right? But then anger, getting ourselves, both of those are kind of a little more like passive as far as responses, right? And so anger then is sort of shifting us into more of an active, more of an action oriented, which allows for change to actually really start to happen kind of response, right? But like you said, we can't stay in anger. We can't stay in fighting, because that's not helpful either. And so then, from a nervous system perspective, then that's when you have to be able to kind of repair in ways that allow you to sort of toggle back and forth, right, between sort of the different situations and have them when you need them. So sometimes we need people fighting the system, right, or fighting for the resources, or fighting because we don't want people, again, you can't be quiet all the time, right? You have to, that's part of how we build bridges, how we create opportunities for people to like learn and grow and realize that maybe they've been acting with best intentions perhaps, but not in a good way. Like you were talking about the decolonizing ourselves internally. But then, we also have to be building something at the same time, something more regenerative, something, and I think joy counters shame, right? In shame, we don't have access to joy. In shame, we don't have access to forgiveness. In shame, we don't have access to, we can't actually change because shame keeps us frozen and stuck in the system. So when you were giving like that analogy of like, the friend, if you found out your father was a murderer, but he'd been really good to you, and sort of that. Yeah. So I guess that like that you wouldn't throw him out, you would still love him. And what would your relationship with that also be like, right? And you were talking about that war inside yourself. And I think shame is part of what keeps us locked in that war inside ourselves, instead of being able to step into, and this is where I think we can kind of start to explore like that restorative justice piece, right? Of like what it is to actually be able to get rid of shame so that we can own, like, I had a really good experience with my dad. Other people didn't. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Now, what do I want to be a part of creating in the future? Because it hurts me that even though I had a good experience with my dad might have hurt somebody else. Right. And like that, you know, that violence. I was reading this thing in ancestral healing. They were talking about how if our ancestor has perpetuated harm or received harm, when we're working with ancestral healing practices, we have to include either the person who perpetuated harm on our ancestor or received harm by our ancestor. We have to include them in our family constellation, actually, because now there is an energetic bond, an energetic connection, and that person is actually part of our deeply intertwined with our family story. And we can't ancestrally heal without also including the people that our ancestors were in contact with, particularly in these highly charged situations. So I feel like I'm kind of like rambling or like pulling a bunch of different threads together, kind of from what you shared and how my brain's working. But yeah, I mean, I would love to turn it back over to you and kind of this, yeah, what is the role of joy? What is the role of imagination and creativity? I've heard you talk about art, you know, and restorative justice, because that whole idea of how do we move out of shame and out of the things that we've known to be able to create something we've maybe never seen before, to be able to create something new and maybe more whole, rather than like continually divisive and at war. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't know if it's shame from my perspective. I think it's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone like hurts you or violates you, right? And if it's addressed,
Yeah.
then we can heal from it.
I
But
think
when you're-
shame is probably more the white experience, the white body experience, and hurt is probably more the black body experience. So
right.
yes, thank you for naming that. Yeah.
And I think when you're hurt and it's not addressed, it turns to anger.
Mm.
Because we know anger is like this surface emotion that happens once the original emotion was not addressed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just wanted to say that about the hurt. I feel that then we don't know how to address it because we're taught be quiet, absorb it. That's what you got to deal with. It is what it is. And so when we inherit these attitudes, inherit these things, because I never understood why, you know, we go from 0 to 100 real quick. Mm-hmm. But I've learned that I have inherited a lot of hurt and a lot of anger that's in my body. So when something happens to me today that may be at a 3, maybe I should be upset by a 3, I'm already at an 8. Or if I get a phone call, the first thing is going to come to my mind something negative, because it's so programmed in me. And because I have learned over these years how to operate in a new foundation, because when I look at my foundation and what's inside of me, it is a lot of hurt, neglect. I was not mothered. I was not fathered. I was not nurtured. I was not cared for. So when you have an individual that is raised in this environment, what do you think will happen? They're going to use drugs, medicate themselves. They're going to do harmful things to people because hurt people. They're going to be not at the productive human beings that they could be because nobody never taught them how or validated them to do so. And so I've learned the most important thing is to, before we try to do anything for anybody, sit down and talk to them. We have to help validate the human soul, because it doesn't matter all the nice things that I do for you, how great I think you can be, your talents I recognize, if you internally don't see it. How do we help people put their lights on? And you can't help people put their lights on until we give joy. And joy is not just, oh, just having fun, oh, just yes. But it's this piece of that we need in our soul. It's like food for our soul. And joy can come in so many different forms and different ways, depending on what is joy to that individual. But it's a space that we have that is food for the soul. You know how they say soul food? It is. Rather it gives you validation, rather it gives you comfort, rather it gives you laughter, rather it gives you peace, is this space that we intentionally create in this joy before we start doing stuff. Because you got to remember, especially from us, we've been working hard, and then they told us we was lazy. We working hard as hell. We ain't making no money, and they telling us we lazy. We not lazy. We just have not been in positions where our gifts and talents were acknowledged or we was compensated for them. We're not. And so we don't even see the value of ourselves, because I'm healing from it myself. Being Dr. Shanequa Smith, because it's still, and I live in West Virginia. Population of Black people, I think, is like 3%. I live in a community where there's a lot of colored people, more colored people. You know, we have different, not nationalities, but we have colored people in our community. So I do see some Black people, or we're all connected because we're all in an economic status. So, because now it's not even about only race, but it's also about class.
Yeah.
You know, so we're connected to people in our community in that way. But I realized joy, enjoying life, wanting to live, knowing your purpose, having the resiliency to overcome the hard things in life because we know we're part of a bigger thing, that's missing. Love. I've learned as a parent, we spend so much time providing, we didn't parent.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to parent because I thought parenting was providing, which they're two different things. And this is what we with. So we need this joy. We need this space of people need to know you care about them before they care about what you do. And I'm learning is the lack of not knowing each other, not understanding who we are, not understanding the contextual environments we are, not understanding how experiences and situations affect us. Education is important. But we are in a culture, we just get with each other because we need to do something, and we doing. We can't sit down and educate these people. We expect people to know, or we expect if I tell you something, you should know what's in my head because I told you, you should imagine it the same way I do. And if you fell short, then you're wrong. We don't teach each other. And I'm not only talking about teaching each other skills, because a lot of people, especially in this technology world we have, people can go on the University of YouTube and Google and learn some things.
Yeah.
But there are some intangible skills, I would call them, that we need, that humans give humans, experiences give humans, that we're missing because we live in a system that is very strategic in making sure we don't have these things. I even look at, you know, even African Americans and people of color that have economically, in some sense, have gained some things, but at the cost of our souls. I have been in a room with Black women that are making decent money to take care of their families, but have jobs that are killing our people, that are not good to our Black and brown children. And their husbands or their partners cannot go out there and get a suffice job because he got a felony 20 years ago. And even though he's a 40-year-old man, he cannot get a decent job to support his family. So education is so important on a preventive level, because when we integrate this education and these experiences into people early, it will prevent a lot of things. And I'm learning too, the model that we use to help people. I'm learning myself being a professional. I mean, I lived in it, now being a professional in it. I can't help 1,000 people right now. I can't. What it takes for me to walk and accomplish not only my own kids, my own self, and my inherited family, people in my community, kids I have, it takes a lot to help us heal. I have a lot of children. So I told you my children are 21 and 19. So all the kids they graduated with are just in our community. The working poor don't know what to do. This is what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And I'm like trying to catch them. They're having babies, getting apartments. Now they working. They can't get education. They never was educated strongly when they was in high school. So they're not even going to college. And how do we catch them? And then when they get so overwhelmed, they get hooked on drugs or just forget fighting, you know, living. And then we want to come in with all these programs to help them. It's a little too late. So it's about that education of not only who we learn who we are, why we like this, and how could we learn to be in a transformative space. And not only education in our brain, education from our spirit, because truthfully healing is a spiritual thing. It don't matter what your religion is, what your belief is, what you call your higher being, we collectively need to work together, because I believe we are body. Everybody come here to be part of the body. It don't matter. But if you don't know you're supposed to be part of the body, or you only seen an eye. Now you trying to be an eye and you a leg. Now you operating like an eye, but you're supposed to be a leg. Or I tell people, we all look the same, but everybody got different shoe sizes. So for me, I don't say it's bad, because I might say something's bad for me. It might be good for you. Is it bad? So I say, hey, that's not my shoe size. Because we all wear different shoe sizes. And you know, as women, we go in the store, we see some beautiful shoes. But if they not your size, you don't buy them. I don't care how much you love the shoes, you know you can't wear them. Yeah. So I think as we start living this space of life, if we give people the opportunity to figure out what their shoe size is, ain't nobody got to compete. I don't compete with nobody when I go in the shoe store. I wear size 10. I go in the 10 section. That's what I'm buying. I don't go in the 8, 9 because I know my lane. And lastly, opportunities. I realize a lot of good-hearted people, and I've learned myself, I'll get an opportunity and I'll give it to a young person. I got this for you. I got that for you. But is that what the person wanted? Is that what was for them? And then I get frustrated. I gave this opportunity for you. You being lazy, you not working. No, I gave them the opportunity. Did I take the time to find out what opportunity they need?
Yeah.
And it's so funny.
That reminds me of a quote that's like, yeah, someday that person that you're bending over backwards for is going to turn around and tell you they never asked for it, and they'll be right. And it's like, oh shit. Like,
and you know, taking on our colonized way, because you know we got some ways that are colonized, but we don't see it as bad. And you know, I got a whole doctorate degree, so I already specialize in something. I shouldn't have to learn nothing. This is what I know. Listen to me, but that's not true. Yeah. When you're learning with humans, you gotta keep learning and keep learning. Because when I go to you and I talk to you, like my daughter, she wants to be an herbalist. I don't know nothing about herbs, but now I have the knowledge to make sure I help build community around her. And I got to try to learn to help her navigate. I always got to keep learning. I meet a human, I meet somebody and they say, oh, I got this, or I would like to do this. I don't know nothing about that. Guess what? I got to go figure out and learn. How can I help support them? I don't say, well, this is what I got and you take what I got and you better do a good job in this opportunity. Because this is what we taught. Take the opportunity you can get and not somebody to nurture you. So, because once you help, because you don't want to help people, you want to teach people how to help themselves. Right. Once people can help themselves, we're going to be the fabulous divine human beings that we was put here for.
And I think, you know, what you're pointing to, what one of the analogies that I sort of look at, it's funny, like I have a little bit of an agricultural background, right? And in sustainable ag and working on farms. And, you know, I always talk about how like monoculture in agriculture is basically like the white supremacy. It's the white supremacist mindset applied to agriculture, right? And then we have like permaculture and we have these ways of like building more diversity, right? Looking for ecosystems that have diversity because they're more resilient, because they're just healthier, right? Because there's all these different pieces that work together. And we're only just beginning to understand how different like fungus and microorganisms in the soil actually like help the root systems of the other plants. And, you know, and so there's all of this stuff. And it's like what you're talking about, people being in their lane, right? Like one plant is not going to try and do another function. It's going to like be the plant that it is. But then in the meantime, there's all these other like symbiotic relationships that unfold. And, you know, and it's not that there isn't conflict and it's not that there isn't some like competition, but it's like in service to the larger body of the ecosystem, to what has, to the aliveness that is present when all of these pieces work together, even when sometimes that actually means death or composting or like these other things, right? So, you know, I'm hearing you talk too about like, in what you're sharing, I'm sort of picking up on this thread of differentiating between what actually like what community actually is, right? And you're talking about community sort of being, how do we actually learn to listen to each other and to hear in the other person's expression, like who they really are and like who they really want to be and what they're really here to offer to us, and us being like the whole. And then how do we use, okay, well, that's your gift and this is my gift and that's that person's gift. And so how do we come together to like make sure that, and oh, that person over there has a gift that would support that person, and that person over there has some resourcing that they don't need that could funnel over, you know, and suddenly it becomes this like really interwoven, like really beautiful community. And, you know, and I think in our very individualistic society, at least here in the US, you know, but I think a lot of, again, European descendant white culture, you know, has this sort of mindset, right? It's like, it's this very like individualistic thing, you know, that we have a foundational myth in this country that we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and create ourselves individually and do things for ourselves, right? And like, and or then if we are in community, it's like, this is where the inner decolonizing piece comes in, right? It's extractive. It's like, I'm going to become famous and I'm going to have all these followers, or I'm going to have all this like, or I should somehow be able to teach tons of people all at once, you know, or somehow like that. Then it's still very transactional. It's still very capitalistic and extractive often. And you know, and it's either the people who are like the sort of the central figures feel leached from, or then they're leeching from others, or, you know, it's just, it's not really building anything in a different way. It's still existing in these same paradigms and these same types of systems and these same like ways of thinking about the world. And, you know, so much of what you're describing is much more relational, you know, and it's like we have to, and it's sort of smaller scale. It's more these like micro ecosystems. If we make healthier micro ecosystems, who's around me right now, who's in my immediate community, who can I have the most impact in the day-to-day life with my gifts to help them figure out what their gifts are. And then like that, and trusting that as they then really land in their gifts and in their purpose, that's going to like ripple out. And we're going to end up creating these like micro ecosystems that are healthier, that then create this macro ecosystem that's like also healthier. And
but the key is, if I'm not in that space to help create that for myself, how can I emulate or show you how to do it? And we are people, it's hard for us to create what we never seen. So if the system tell you this is what you have to do, you do it with a good intent. And then a lot of us get like in a web, in a spider's web, once we in there and be like, oh shucks, this is not what I thought. I thought I could come here and create change. I thought I was gonna, but we webbed in now. Because now I tell people, you can't fight the oppressor that pays your mortgage. People got to pay their bills. They got to feed their kids got to go to college. So I understand now that you're kind of like trapped in a way, but we can be strategic. Because what do you know that, or what capacity you have still to build that alternative space? So we can be healthy. Because I don't think we have to be either or. You either be successful and lose your soul, or keep your soul and be poor. It shouldn't be either or. We can grow in both spaces. And I think just being bold enough, and we have to do it collectively, because it's not designed for us to be successful doing this transitional work by ourselves in our own space. It's supposed to be like that. That's the way the colonizer make us think. And then we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust people. And so we be in our safe space. This is how we operate in our safe space. But we need to create these different spaces. And not only that, but continue to work in these spaces when it's hard, because I believe that we are creating an example people never seen. And they have to see this, your resiliency, and you actually doing it to believe, oh, shucks, we can do it. And it don't have to be because we're doing the right thing. We have to be at the bottom of the totem pole. I don't believe that neither.
Yeah, well, it feels like, you know, you're talking about safe spaces, you know, and I think that's like part of what, there's a time, I've heard this distinction between safe spaces and brave spaces, you know, and that there's a time and a place for safe spaces, right? Particularly for folks who exist in bodies that are systemically marginalized, right? Or suffer systemic trauma, right? Like there's a time and a place for them. You know, I know there is a time and a place for women to maybe like have women's spaces, right? Because existing outside of the male gaze is really important for feeling a sense of safety and healing and realizing who you are outside of that. For Black people, existing outside, you know, finding spaces to come together where white people aren't present, and like you get to realize like, wait, who are we when white people aren't around? Who are we when white people aren't looking at us, right? Like that's an important thing to like have spaces to sort of like have those questions, right? I mean, Black Panther, right? Amazing movie. And, you know, one of the things I love about that movie is the villain in that movie was not the Michael B. Jordan character. The villain in that movie was whiteness, you know, and you see these two men who are just opposite sides of the same coin, right? You see one who is this Black man who was raised in a country without whiteness, and you see one who is a Black man who was raised in whiteness. And then you see like what that did to them, right? And like, and how they grew differently because of that. And, you know, so I think there's a time and a space for safe places, right? And there's a time and a space for brave spaces being places that we go to build our capacity for healthy conflict, for healthy challenge, to learn how to be then in places where there is some tension, where you are around people whose experiences are not exactly like yours, you know, and can still find the common humanity and still also learn to respect the differences, right? Common humanity not being, let's like whitewash, let's like brush under the rug all the ways that we're different, because the only like belonging should not be contingent on sameness, right? So we need to find ways to belong to each other without having to only focus on the things that make us the same, you know, because that's a huge piece of this, letting people actually live their purpose, you know. And that's a piece that I think, I mean, I'm aware of our time, and you know, we could talk about this for days and days and days, but you know, that's a piece that I feel like, you know, I kind of want to just call in like white wellness spaces and white dominated wellness spaces, because I think a lot of those spaces try to make themselves safe spaces for people to heal. And that's not inherently bad. And we rob, you know, it's like that idea of if somebody always carries things for you, the muscles in your arms literally get weaker. And even though they think they're being nice by like carrying that for you, right? Or what you were talking about when people come in with programs, right? And they want to help, but like that whole saviorism thing, like it's well intentioned, but then you're not actually helping that person become stronger so that they have a certain sense of autonomy and agency and sovereignty and just strength and ability to function in the world. You know, it actually becomes this enabling thing. And so how many of the gestures, like the difference between niceness and kindness, you know, are we being nice, which is often an enabling thing, or are we being kind, which is like, I'm going to meet you as a soul, me as a soul, you as a soul, drop the roles, drop the identities. Who are you? Who am I? How are we the same? How are we different? And how do we both, like, how do we set things up so that we both thrive, you know, or we all thrive? And like, that feels to me like that's where restorative justice really starts to come in. And that's where brave spaces start to come in. And so that's for me, like, you know, part of why I wanted to have like this podcast. Like people are going to hear things on this podcast from time to time that they may not have experienced, or they may not even always agree with. And like, and that's okay, because the whole point is like, how do we start to realize like there's a whole diverse world out there of different experiences, different opinions. Those opinions were shaped by experiences that were different. And from there, like, how do we learn to be more human by putting ourselves in spaces where we sometimes hear things that are challenging for us, or sometimes hear things that we don't agree with, and like, and still choose to say, I choose love in this moment, like love for me and love for you. And I trust that if I can love me and I can love you, then the decisions I make and the actions I take are going to be on the side of love, and be on the side of growth, and be on the side of reparative, restorative justice, right? Not criminal justice, but punishment justice, but justice that builds something new, justice that builds people up and helps people repair so that they can become better humans and more humans, rather than punishing them for for actions that usually are actually coming from a place of having grown up in systems that were harmful to them, or in situations that were harmful to them, or that shaped them in ways that weren't ideal. Like you said, that plant thing, you know, you don't change the plant, you change the nutrients and the access to nutrients.
I think it's interesting that you said it was like safe and brave places, because to me, if I'm not brave in a space, then it's not safe. When I say a safe space, I have to be brave in that space. I don't need no one to cuddle us and make us feel comfortable in the system where I'm going to have you here so you could go back. No, if I cannot be brave, if I cannot be in a space that where I'm learning and not getting resiliency where I'm just bouncing back and getting back into the same space, but resiliency with wisdom. So I can continue to not only get out of the situation I'm in, but when I face another different situation, have the resiliency to get there. I have been and met a lot of nice, white, good-hearted people that even culturally, you know, they have these cultural practices that we have lost, our cultural practices that they have picked up. Now they want to come back and restore it. The first thing I'm going to tell them, stop charging us. Don't charge people of color to give them back what was stolen from them. If you are in a space and you are in a place that you have learned and picked up indigenous practices, people of color practices, where you know that's healing and that's help, it's your responsibility to give that back to them. Now, I don't know how you're going to do it if your money's and economics attached to it. I don't know how to tell you that, get another occupation to cover your money, ask your friends to sponsor you so you can create a scholarship program and ask your friends, white people, to sponsor you so you could give this service back to Black people. I had a white woman to charge me to play African drums. She know how to play drums, but she's going to say she charged, I forgot how much an hour, but I looked at her like she was crazy. Like, this is my culture that I'm coming to you to ask you to help me to restore, and you're going to charge me? And you know, I'm already, and I told her I was in an economic situation, because I believe that when we give the gift of love and we give the gift of healing, there's nothing wrong to gift back. So, you know, because we are humans, we like to be appreciated, we have to be loved, but this is out of a person giving it to them because they're moved to, not because if I don't pay you X amount of dollars, I can't receive the service. Another thing I think is important too is that when they open up these spaces, because I've been in spaces and they all are in the vibe, and I'm kind of missing something. You know, it's not clicking, and maybe the meditation or maybe what we're doing is kind of helpful, but I'm not flowing in it. And I realize some of this stuff is just cultural. Some stuff work for women, some stuff work for men, some stuff work for kids, some stuff work for teenagers. And no one never gave me that space to be like, it's okay, Shanequa. Like I tell people all the time, you know, when I have a conversation, I say, listen, eat the meat and spit out the bones. There's things I'm going to say that's going to be applicable to you, and there's things that don't work. Don't think you have to take everything in and thinking no, we're all different. Take what's accessible to you and leave the rest. And I think I had to develop that space myself. And so when I do go in these spaces of whiteness, and because I have not been in spaces of Black healing, so I didn't have nothing to compare. And so when I finally got into spaces of Black healing, I said, oh, okay, now I understand. It's like a person going into a foreign country to do a good deed, but you don't understand the language. It's hard for you to connect with the people. You're there doing a service, but you can't really connect with them. You really don't know. You're just going there, just doing a thing. It would be beneficial to kind of learn the culture a little bit, learn the language. So it will help you, you know, everything have an art and science to it. So it will help you balance your art and science in your delivery. And not just come and say, hey, I had this good delivery. And I think all the nice, because I have met also some nice white people that, I don't know, you just get it. You help without making somebody feel like they need help. You assist without making someone feel bad that you're assisting. You are there to say, you know, some people say, oh, Shanequa, I will help you. And I say, well, can you tell me what your LA cartel menu is? Because you may be able to provide help I never even knew existed. And some people are very good at saying, this is what I can do to help. And this is what people say, this is what I'm going to give you. And this is what you need. But no, teach people, well, Shanequa, this is what I have, but this can be your option. That can be your option. Well, I don't know how to do that option, but I have a friend. Or I don't know that option, maybe we can learn together. Like giving people that liberty back. And I don't know. And I think that really comes from a divine space, because it's something that you just, I mean, we can learn from each other, but you have to intentionally create that space, because we just automatically want to fly in and And no, we got to talk to people. And I think it's by purpose, we have 2 ears and 2 eyes, 1 mouth and 1 brain. But this culture have told us the more you have in your brain, the more access to resources you have, the more you should speak and do. No, I think the more you have access to, the more you have in your brain, you need to sit down and learn.
Yeah.
So you
and the
can
more
take,
you have to share.
Right. And then it can show you how you can be more effective in your delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I just want to take a moment and just kind of let some of that settle, because I feel like we've covered a lot of territory in this conversation. So I want to give people listening a minute to just take some deep breaths. And so I also want to, as we kind of wrap up for today, again, I feel like we could just talking for forever. But I want to give you an opportunity to kind of, if there's a way people can support you, or if you have any, community organizing efforts or any organizations that you want to signal boost, or, in kind of the spirit of, as we're talking about sort of like boosting and sharing and supporting and connecting.
Well, one thing I know is important is the lack of education that keeps us divided. Education is very important. And speaking of education, books are important. African American books are important. And I raised my children not even knowing the importance of reading my children Black books, books that look like them, books that they can open and see themselves and validate themselves. So I collect books, and books are very expensive, but you can contact me at Dr. Shanequa Smith at gmail.com. And I know you have the spelling K in there, and contact me, and I can give you a list of books that you can pick from. We really appreciate it. I mean, I just give books to families. I don't charge people. Anytime I have books, I see kids, sometimes in the supermarket, I see a mother with a kid, I give them books, because I know books is something we don't have in our homes. We can't afford to have in our homes a lot of times, or even the purpose of reading to our children have been lost. That is very important. And I'm in Charleston, and truthfully, I don't have an organization, because in order for me to establish an organization, they want me to establish all these rules and regulations that I keep intact. It would take me from doing the work that I know that I'm gifted here to do. So I don't have, I have a business because I need a business. So I do have a business, Restorative Actions, that I do my work through also. But it's important for Black books. I appreciate that. And I mean, I have my Girl Scouts, so I have a Girl Scout troop. I have a Girl Scout troop that we need support. We have one of the African American troops in Charleston, and we use our Girl Scouts to expose our girls. We just took them to the state fair. We took them to the amusement park this year, and whatever resources we have, the more we can expose our girls, not only our girls, but our families too. And our Girl Scouts is in a housing complex. So we have a bunch of families that cannot afford to bring joy to their life. They cannot afford to expose their children nor themselves to the things that are healthier that will help them be human beings. So my Girl Scouts is very important, and we definitely need support there. And lastly, we always talk about the school to prison pipeline. A lot of people are familiar with the school to prison pipeline, but no one ever built a safety pipeline. So I can't break that school to prison pipeline, because they have it so strategically organized. It's flowing, but I can create a safety pipeline. And so receiving support to work with the schools. I mean, I do stuff with Rock the Vote with the schools. We do appreciation for our teachers. Our teachers are human. They working so hard. No one's talking to the teachers, support, doing nice things for the teachers, helping the principals, working with the kids. And this is my goal, to help create, not only me, but work with others for us, because we cannot continue to fight. We must take our resources, our skills, energy, and life, and try to build.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll make sure then I get some links for some of those things from you and have those in the show notes. Or then, yes, like you said, people can email you if they want to kind of get connected in some way. I would also say too, I mean, it's great. Like, I can attest to just how much time and energy and love Shanequa pours into her community. So even if it looks like your Venmo or whatever, and people just sending you some money, like, it's going to get turned around and get poured into the community, because that's just who you are as a human. And also encourage people to find out if there are efforts in their communities that are happening too, and certainly it's helpful to support Shanequa and to support her efforts in Charleston and things like that. But you know, what's happening. Like, that's something I'm sort of always challenging myself by. Like, it's so easy to get so focused on what's happening, you know, overseas, or what's happening, whatever happens to be like the easiest to look at, or the easiest to see, or like the most obvious thing. You know, some tragedy happens in some community and everybody pours, you know, into that. And not that that's a bad thing, but you know, I look around sometimes and like, I don't actually feel like I do as good a job as I could do of being aware of what's actually happening in my community around me, you know. And there's I live right near an elementary school right now, and you know, they have a lot of kids who are on the free and reduced lunches. And so like when the pandemic was happening, you know, there were a lot of efforts to keep those lunches going at school, because for some people those were the only meals that they would really get for some of those kids. And so you know, I'd be on my daily walks and I'd see like kids going to the school to come back with their bags of food to like take them home. They'd be walking, or like I'd see moms going and picking up several bags of food to bring home for the kids. Or, you know, and there were organizations and community organizations to actually connect the school with farms that had excess produce, because the farmers markets weren't happening. So it was really cool to sort of see how there was like stuff in my actual community, because it's so easy to not see that stuff, you know. And so I don't know, that's a challenge I'm setting for myself, and I invite any listeners to maybe also challenge themselves, like look around at your actual community and what needs doing, what's already being done there, and how can you support some of those efforts, and more in a grassroots way. Like, right, like what are the people of color, or the people of the groups that, of the systemically marginalized groups, what are the efforts that they're leading? What are the efforts that they're saying they want done? And how can you support those, rather than like just giving to sort of like, you know, Planned Parenthood, for example, which is very state funded actually, you know, and it does a lot of good, but there's also other reproductive justice organizations that are more grassroots oriented, that support people of color more. And anyway, so that's kind of a whole tangent, but you know, we have to start, part of this whole decolonizing, the inner decolonization is starting to ask those questions. What do I view as credible? And is it white people who already have power? And if so, is there a way I can challenge that and start looking for other people who are doing really powerful community organizing efforts, or, you know, community justice efforts? And how can I start to like not think it's on me to create that? Again, particularly for us white people, we're taught that if there's a problem, we should step in and figure out how to create it, right? Or how to solve it. And like, what if there's already shit happening? And how can we then actually lend our efforts to the stuff that's already happening, rather than thinking it's on us to create it? So I'm sort of just sharing all of that because I think, you know, we've talked a lot about sort of some of the inner decolonizing work and all of that stuff. And so I want to kind of use your signal boost also as a way to encourage people to start to challenge some of their own thoughts, and to start to think about, to just start to think about supporting community efforts in different ways than maybe they have before.
And I think that is important for us to decolonize our ways of making the world a better place. Stop doing all these 50,000 things and we're burnt out. Find you one family. Find you one child, whatever your capacity is, 2 people, 5 people, 7 people, whatever your life capacity is, and walk with them. Help them heal. This healing is not a seminar thing. It's not a workshop thing. It's a life thing. It's like you said, it's a changing of the DNA. Usually in my culture, when our children are 18, we kick them out the house, and because they're disrespectful and we can't control them. But I didn't understand. A lot of time us parents don't have the mental, financial, or social capacity to carry them further. So we throw them out the house in hopes that they'll land on their feet. My son is 21 living in my basement, because I understand the importance of healing his DNA. I understand the importance of getting him out of that mindset. He's out here in the world. He got to do whatever he got to do to survive. That's in my son's DNA. This is how he's thinking. I got to do what I got to do. It don't matter. My son is 21 and he never had a life experience to make him think that. But because of all the generational trauma he healed from his father that been on the street since he was 14, my son is in his DNA. So I have him home healing. So just walk with 1 or 2 people, walk with one school, walk with one organization, and support them in this long journey of healing. And stop picking up projects that feel good, and question yourself. Are you doing this to make you feel good,
Mm.
or are you doing this to help somebody else heal?
Mm-hmm. Which is also helping you heal, because when we live in systems, and I think this is like a key piece, particularly for those of us in white bodies, because one of the ways we deflect that shame or the discomfort of the legacy of violence that we've inherited is by trying to help people, right? So I think that's what you're pointing to with, is this to make me feel good, or is this actually to help all of us heal? Because systems that hurt somebody aren't actually good, even for the people that seem like they're benefiting from them.
Right.
And we know that, we see that with energetics and with, with all the stuff that we've talked about. And so, it's, I think we have to, part of how we challenge sort of some of that saviorism is starting to really land in it's okay to be a little bit selfish, right? I'm doing some of this because it actually will make a better world, like for them, but also for me, because we're not separate. And so then it's like taking the selfish route to then not be selfish, instead of taking the self-sacrificing, martyring savior route, which actually ends up being more selfish and self-serving than if we say, you know what, I actually am really invested in this because it's important for me, and then also ends up making a difference for other people because we're all connected. Yeah. Well, thank you, Shanequa, so much for being here, for sharing about your experiences, for sharing your wisdom, for just being just an amazing and inspiring and wise, soulful human. And and just being on the healing path that you're on, and being so passionate about that, and bringing healing to everybody you come in contact with.
So grateful to come from a dry place and to bring back the voice that we don't have to stay dry and we can heal. And be in a space of education and love. I know we didn't speak much about that word love, but that's really the key of everything. How do we hold compassion above offenses? That's why I'm walking now. How do I hold compassion above offenses, especially the offenses that I already inherited, that perspectives that I have. But thank you for creating this space. And this is what we need. We need to learn. We need spaces of healing. We need spaces of conversation to talk about these things that's only in our head and we don't talk about in public because it's not the right thing to do. Yes, it is. We're human and we need to deal with these things so we can be better.
Yeah. Perfectionism is white supremacy too. All right. Well, to close out, let's all take a few deep breaths together and just allow for the integration of this conversation to start to begin. There may be pieces of it that stick with you for days, right? That's learning and unlearning, right? We learn and we unlearn, and it takes time for that to happen. And so let's allow whatever jumped out at you from this conversation. I want to invite you to just kind of maybe pick one or two pieces, right? Don't worry about taking it all in. And let that just start to ripple through you, into your body, into your heart, into your soul, beyond just your mind. If you have questions or you want to share any realizations that you had, you're welcome to leave a comment for me on the anchor.fm platform where this podcast is hosted. You can connect with me on Instagram at wildsacredjourney_KP, or you can email me, kate@wildsacredjourney.com. You can email Shanequa at drshanequasmith@gmail.com. I'll have her information in the show notes. And like I said, or you can get it to me and I'll get it to her, whatever kind of works. If you appreciated this podcast, or you feel like there are other people that you feel like need to hear this and want to help spread the learning and the teaching and the unlearning and the sharing and the growth and the healing, rate the podcast, share the podcast, right? It helps support the podcast. It helps support Shanequa. It helps support me. It helps just keep this conversation like growing and rippling wider. And, it's that being an intimate, small community, but also having wide ripple impacts. And so thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Shanequa, for being here. And yeah, may we all just find ways to hold compassion over offenses. May we all find ways to find joy, even amidst the challenges of life and the things that happen to us that we didn't deserve, but happened to us anyway. And may we all change culture, right? Inner culture and outer culture. Be more human. So yeah, till next time.